Welcome, Jane and Rebecca. We're so thankful for your participation, your deposit in what you have to share with us towards our projects on Indigenous theological education. We really appreciate the many countries that you have taught in and the perspectives that bring. So welcome.
Thank you, Ross. And we'll have some fun in this hour, folks. If I laugh, then you know I'm breathing. And I heard something beautiful yesterday. My friend was here for lunch, and she said, I think you have a new axiom. You know when you hear it, inside you, you know it's true. And I thought that was a beautiful way to describe. And in one of the books, we have all the axioms, and on the podcast. And one of the axioms is using dialogue in the educational process at any place in any level. The most important principle is time, and it's in this order in importance. It's time, time, and time. In that order, of course. Because really, the preparation is you gotta know who the subjects are. And that subject I have always tried. I don't know if the publisher did it in my books, but I said that has a capital S. It's like your Lake Mary. That has a capital L. It's significant. It's almost a metaphor in itself. Mm-hmm. So the preparation, knowing who you are working with, knowing, Paulo Freire spoke of it as, what did he call it? Themes, generative themes. That is, if you know the generative themes, they are going to learn because you will be speaking to them. And I think of you, Ross and Mary, you're not only speaking to them in Quichua, you are speaking to them in their themes. Now, if you're a professor, that is not easy. Dialogue education, and you've read the books, they're simple principles that you already use. The whole system is so simple. Open questions, respect, of course. I read something last week that was so beautiful. Respect is in the eyes. Isn't that beautiful? What do your learners, what do you see in my eyes? Wow, I like that phrase. It helped me. Respect is in the eyes. You can't fool people. Your eyes give you away. And also, I want to celebrate what Ross did in sending Rebecca and me that email, a long email with, I want you to know what you're getting into, so to speak. And that was very gracious. But don't you know, that took a lot of, guess what, time. People say, oh, I like this, it's a good book, but I could never do that. I haven't got the time. And I am a little bold. At 93, I can say pretty much what I want to say. And I usually say, well, I don't know about you, but I had 24 hours yesterday. It's how, obviously, when I'm teasing, but not teasing, I'm saying, if you don't do this, if you don't do the learning needs and resources assessment, the resources, oh my gosh, imagine the resources among the people, the Quichua folks you're working with. Ooh, all their stories. Paulo Freire said something to me personally. I was so touched. He said, Jane, learn the Swahili proverbs. Kidole kimoja Hachinji Utsa. One finger doesn't kill a bug. Gotta have two fingers. Isn't that wonderful? It tells the whole story. It goes on and on as a metaphor will. But I love that. And so many. Haraka, haraka, hyena, baraka. Haste, haste, no blessing. And you gotta laugh. They're delightful. And I remember his saying that, and I thought it was so wise. So wise. Let me share one thing that I learned, believe it or not, 2 days ago. I'm not joking. I'm reading my dear Walter Brueggemann. He's a great, you all know his work. He's a scripture scholar and works with the Hebrew Bible. But he's amazing. I love him. And he said something very interesting. In 1919, 5 writers who were writing in the social sciences, not together, they didn't know what all of the others were writing, spoke in 1919 of the dialogical principle in education. Can you imagine? I never knew that. And I'm delighted because essentially that's what we're saying. It's got to be a dialogue. I think of the Gospels, the wonderful line from Jesus. God, I always say God bless him, but you know what I mean. He says, who do you say I am? And he tells parables and he doesn't unlock them, doesn't tell them you what they mean. It's a metaphor. And the individual from her experience, his experience, learns what Jesus is teaching through the stories. Mm-hmm. Who was saying about storied education? Is that your work, Tom?
Yes.
Wow, it's everything, Tom. And it's again Paulo Freire saying to me, learn the Proverbs. A proverb is a story.
Exactly.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
I was reading about, we had to hike 2 days in. It was on, I think, putting things into practice or something. And then I was taken by the way, like you saw that little shack with a no-sided shack alongside the path in the mountain.
Wasn't that amazing?
And then you, because I would have said, oh, what about that over there? But you didn't do that. You said, can you find a place? And then I'm like, well, I'm curious just to know why it's by the path, what will happen as people come and go? Will they be distracted? Will people comment? Well, like what's going to happen when they come and go? And among the Quichua people, a lot of the times, like Ross is always taught in places that could be like reproduced. So he's always in their buildings and stuff like that, instead of having to have but they have to have their buildings, and they spend a lot of time and money building buildings instead of teaching people. So anyway, so having that contrast in mind, like they don't think they're somebody, there's the dignity piece, unless they have a building, and it's got to be one that they don't have any objections to. Like he's had many people offer, oh, well, we don't want to go to his building. And this is very typical, and even among their villages. So I was curious as to see in that story, what was going to happen with those people who walked 2 hours in, messed around in the mud, and they were like, what, we have to live in tents? And I'm like, ooh, were they prepared or not prepared for that? You know, and just all the dynamics of that, because we've been in remote areas and can totally relate to all of that, you know.
And it was so beautiful. It brings it all to mind. And remember the story later on in that chapter. I was in there and they were working in small groups, and some women were walking by and they were carrying, as they do, the wood and and so heavy, and walking, stumbling up the mountain with that weight every day. And don't you know, they said something, and they said it not in Swahili, but in the local language.
Mhm.
And a young man who was sitting by the open window said, was started to laugh. And I said to him, Stefan, what did you hear? And the woman had said, oh, I love it. Talk, talk.
Talk, talk, talk.
All
Yeah.
they do is talk. And we learn nothing. Oh my God. And I said, whoa, let's stop everything. Hold the fort. And I again said to them, what can we do? That is a huge statement. And it comes right through the window at us. We can't ignore it, can we? Okay, no, we can't ignore it. And they were laughing and all the rest. And then there was a water person. This was with Save the Children. And they had all these technical folks. So there are farmers and engineers and water, what do you call them? People who knew how to put in water systems. I don't know what the word is, but they were all there. And the man who was the waterman, if I can call him that, said, well, you know that they have to go down the mountain because there's a place I saw where the water system was broken. And I said, well, and everybody said, let's go. And the whole group got together. They fixed that water system. I did too. My hands were torn and muddy and rough. And we stopped the course. Wouldn't it be interesting if someone passed a graduate course? And somebody's using PowerPoint and the professor's talking. And if somebody passed and said, talk, 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 all they do is talk, and we learn nothing. I think that should be a t-shirt. Well, she made a proclamation out of her own, and she's carrying, a bundle of wood and the big heavy pail of water. She had authority. She turned us off and she turned us on in another direction. And if I say so myself, I think that was the best listening I ever did. And I didn't understand the language. I had to ask the guy, what did she say? What a story, huh? Again, that's what we've got. And all of you have those stories. The preparation, the designing, using the 8 design steps, that's hard work. That is such hard work. And then when you've got the design, you get there, you also have to take all the principles and practices and make them fit this group. Knowing my own experience in graduate school, I wish somebody would have done that. Just ask me, what do you really want to know? And that's all an open question. What would be useful to you at this time? I was an old lady when I went there. I was about 50. I can't remember, but I came back from Africa and then I went and did my doctorate. I don't know if that makes sense, that this is hard. The preparation takes time. Mm-hmm. And it's got to be ready. All the materials have to be, you were making that point, Ross, in your note about your research. How do we present the gospel? Oh, and it's so simple. I think more and more the gospel is so simple. It comes down for me, if I may say that here, I'm sure I can. It's the cross, which Jesus did what he was telling us to do. So we were there Even if they had run away, they were still there. They got the impact of the action. That's the learning. That's when the learning takes place. It's amazing, isn't it? It's a great design. I have a funny prayer. Every now and then I'll say, oh, dear God, I love your design. God laughs.
I found it extremely helpful to visit my students in between our class times.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I began to do that because I wanted to see how they were applying what they were learning. And I didn't realize that I was
Learning.
more learning from who I was teaching.
Oh, yes, always. Always.
And then it gave me material for examples.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I told the story at an earlier time. When I was a very young woman, I was a Maryknoll sister and I was working in Tanzania. And just like as Ross said, my colleague and I had visited these families because, and what we had heard was the women wanted to learn to read. What? I mean, they were living in oh my gosh, it was poverty that we have most people have never seen. Okay, but what did they want? They wanted to learn to read. And I was young. I didn't know what I know now, but this is what I did, and I love the story. They came and sat in the little mud hut where we were working. There were about 8 or 9 women. And I went around and I had talked to them, but I couldn't remember. I gave them a big piece of paper each. And I said, talk to the person next to you and tell her what your firstborn did last week that made you laugh. Well, you should have heard the noise in that room. I can still hear it. And then I said, okay, I went with a big pen, big heavy pen, and I went to each woman and I said, tell me the name. So Marwa, and I wrote Marwa, big letters on the white page. And then it was so beautiful. I cry when I tell this story. It was so beautiful. Then they all sat and they're looking at this page. And then I said, read your page to your neighbor. Wow. Noise got louder. They were so proud. They were able to read. And what they were reading was the name Eliza. I'm turning to my friend who has a daughter, Eliza. I mean, and they were so excited. And then I said, we made a small sentence with the whatever. What did Marwa do last week that made you laugh? And then he fell. And I wrote, Marwa fell. She read it to her neighbor. And I'm sure she read it to her husband, who may not have been happy about it. What are you doing reading? What's next? It was such a glorious time. And they were so happy. They took those pages home. They read them just with the name of their firstborn and then the sentence, the little sentence that they had composed. And again, the word, let's go back to the word subject, capital S. We are all subjects of this Zoom. I am not the only subject, but what I mean is, I'm not the only one with knowledge. So when we learn, we know from the marvelous, oh, I'm so excited about the dendrites and the brain, what do they call it, brain research that's going on. It's so exciting. And we know that, for example, let me mention the lake to you, Mary. What's going on now in your mind is that dendrite, Lake, is finding the dendrite that reminds you you met Ross there.
Mhm.
You see Ross. That dendrite goes among millions and millions of dendrites to find the other one. And you're smiling. Why are you smiling?
Mhm.
I just said lake.
Well, not only the lake, but behind Ross is Chimborazo. And
Oh,
that's in the province where we live now. So it has
yes,
from when we met to what we're doing.
well, see,
So
that's what happens.
yeah.
But it's got to happen in the learner.
Mhm.
Listen to the learners. There it is, learning to listen, learning to teach. Ask open questions.
Mhm.
Really, because an open question in a graduate course could be so beautiful. You know, you do that. So beautiful. And people talking, I'm more and more convinced that a small group, the best and most fruitful small group is a pair. Because in a pair, there is no exclusion.
Yeah.
In a pair, there is no exclusion. And but that's a recent discovery of mine, and I don't think I've even ever written about that, but I would like you to hear it. I really believe that is what is richest. Not you and the student, but the student and his colleague, his brother, his uncle, his aunt. The means is dialogue. The end is learning. And the purpose of the whole thing is peace. I like that. And if you can add to it or change it, I welcome that. But as you say so clearly, Ross, your research is to say, how do we teach? And you say theological education. I like the phrase the gospel, almost the gospel as a singular. That means it's monstrous, it's huge, it's essentially the gospel. And so how do you teach that? I think you folks, oh my God, no, I can't even. I see that you folks, all of you, in every site where you are, they see the respect and love in your eyes. They see how earnest you are in trying to do this so it works for them.
Jane, can I tell you a story that's not related
Please,
to the Quichua?
please.
And we a few years ago, well, for 4 years, for a number of years, we were involved in the Venezuelan migrant refugee project because they were flooding our city and stuff like that. And just to shorten it down, like we'd bring a hot meal to the streets. We'd listen to them, pray with them, get down on their level, get looked at really funny by people passing by, kind of like, oh, good, that means we're doing our job, because it means we were being with them and treating them. Well, those were the visits, and we only did that once a week. But as we drove by on other days of the week and they recognized our car and I recognized them, we exchanged a smile. And that was because we're dignity. And there was this guy who took me around when I was trying to help somebody else, and he was helping me help somebody else. And he said, this is Mary, and she has no self-interest. She's just here to help us. She has no self-interest. I don't know how many times he mentioned no self-interest. And so what I learned was a lot of people helping apparently had some sort of self-interest and some sort of string attached. And I was like, I'm just sent to love the people and help how, just trying to be obedient to the gospel, as you say. And it was, and just my being there and giving of my time and the money that we gave and that came through us that God provided. He said, and it was like, I learned so much from that. And then every smile mattered. Every meeting of the eyes, I later learned, because I sat on the ground with a couple and it was brother, sister. I later learned after that from Ross, because he was there feeding him when I had come up to train in a graduate course, anyway, or trauma, whatever I was here for. And he told Ross, your wife saved my life because she sat down and talked to us that day and gave me hope. Well, we know God's the one who gives a hope. But it was like that dignity, that listening, that see, and you put words, subject, object. Because I'm like, why do people come here and treat them like a project? They're not a project, they're people. And it's like, so this has always been a part of me. And it's like, okay, subject, object, that can give me something to latch onto when I'm trying to teach people that.
That's theory. Sitting there. I think your word, dear, takes my, I feel it. Your word takes my breath away. We have a new axiom for Mary, being with. And for heaven's sake, the very heart of my faith is the incarnation.
Right.
Mother McCree, we do have an example, don't we?
And in the Quichua world, I would go and help cook because they would laugh at me and they didn't know I understood some of the stuff. But that was a way to, they talk with me for a while and ask me questions, and then I just try to listen. So
beautiful story, Mary. My God, listen to it, everybody. Wow. That's a wow.
But my hard part, my question is, they love the power distance teaching method.
I read that in Ross's paper.
Oh, he did say that. I didn't read his emails.
Yeah.
That's my hard part, is like, how do we get them on?
It's like education gets in the way of learning.
Oh,
yeah. So the book is really inspiring to different ways different ways to try and put in ways that we can understand. So thank you for that.
And you may find yourself on your back, or at least sitting on the sidewalk, and it is the right place to be. What's that song? Come down where we are supposed to be.
I have a problem to pose.
Yes, please.
And the problem is, if it's not formal, then they don't come.
Well,
unless I cook.
Exactly. I was just going to say, thanks, Mary. I was just going to say that problem is not only in Ecuador. We God help us. I used to say to my colleague, what if they gave a war and nobody came? Because we arrived at the site and nobody, and then they'd see us, and then 2 would come and 3 would come. 30 years in Ecuador, this is stunning. And so the authority, isn't that an interesting thing, Hedda Marie?
Jane, I'm listening to you.
Dear, thank you. But we started this morning talking about authority. When you are a peer of the other, you can talk, and I can say, I've got 2 sons. Remember, Jesus said a man had 2 sons. And everybody in the crowd, the large crowd, looked at one another, said, I have 2 sons. He's talking about me. Everybody in the crowd, or 2 daughters. But I mean, the fact is, in the gospel, we have a book that's much better than this in terms of how do you do it. And it's believe me, I know, oh my gosh, I know, it's not without suffering.
Yeah, one thing that I was going to say, Jane, that impacted me from the book is that the question is usually posed, what should I teach?
Yes.
And you said, listen to what they say, because as they talk, you begin to hear things coming to the surface.
Yes.
And that was such a powerful insight to me.
Yeah. Yes, exactly, honey. Listen. And says learning to listen, learning to teach. This is a systems change.
Yeah.
In Ecuador, there's power, the whole culture, we've thought about this so much of what holds the Quichua back from learning. They've had so many opportunities. Part of it is the people in power like the structure because they want to
course,
stay in
yeah.
power.
Of course.
So
Karen.
I don't know if the thing is to try to get those people involved in the dialogue learning because that threatens their safety of their authority.
Absolutely, dear. Absolutely. I think there are some stories in here about situations where I was involved and scared to death of facing some people who were not living in the villages, but who were holding on. I have a phrase from the lady who works with Margaret Wheatley, but her colleague said, when you are faced with a system that is exploiting and destructive, yikes. It's like facing a room that is ugly and needs everything to be done to it. This lady said, sometimes you may have to blow up the room.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great phrase. And it's a metaphor. She's not being violent. She's not talking about explosives. You're right. You're describing the complexity of the problems. I love it when these things emerge in my life. I found, again, and it was, I believe it was in Brueggemann, one of Brueggemann's books, he uses the word, let me see that I have it right, intractable. Is that the right word? Intractable, is that a word?
Yes,
What it
that's a word.
is, you can do nothing about it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And I think I feel that some of the systems, I'm surrounded, Mary and everybody, by universities, Duke and Chapel Hill and West. We've got, I could throw a stone and hit a university from my front porch. How many huge universities? And what this is doing, no, it is what you are doing using this process, you are breaking down those systems. Now, there's not a lot of evidence. I think there's one university, would you believe it, in Santiago, Chile. It's a medical school.
Mhm.
And the doctor, I think there's a story about him in one of the books. What's his name? Joaquin Montero. And he was studying at UNC, which had a big grant from some rich people to bring doctors from, quote unquote, developing countries to Chapel Hill. And I like to tell the story. Joaquin crossed the road, and there was the medical school. He had been brought to the medical school to learn all the new systems, etc. He crossed the street and he came to the School of Public Health, where guess who was teaching? And he said, this is what we need. And he brought me to Santiago. I gave them the course there. All the teachers in the medical school took the course. And that was 30 years ago. 30 years ago. I thought,
And they're still doing it. They're still using.
oh, and he's teaching, he's sharing dialogue education. He has a regular meeting with the deans of a medical school from the surrounding countries. Joaquin is incredible. And as my friend said once, Jane, Joaquin was telling about something that was happening and how they now have clinics all over the city of Santiago. So if the baby is sick, you don't have to get on a bus and go to the hospital. Oh, Raleigh, I wish they would think of that.
That tells me to keep at it, to keep trying.
But exactly, honey. And the point is, you're doing it. And I think to think broadly of, it's certainly wonderful for these folks whom you're meeting. You're sitting with them, you're laughing with them, you're cooking with them. My goodness. Well, however, all of you are working. Tom and Mary and Rebecca, all of that you do, sweetheart. And Ross and I want to say Hada Marie. Am I right? I mean, seriously, you're doing it. I see now, and perhaps it's because I'm in a rocking chair, but I see now it's a big thing we're doing. Your grandchildren will use dialogue education. Okay, great grandchildren. But my point is, it's coming. It's coming.
When you talk about axioms and stories, when I see the Quichua and all the pomp and circumstance and educational efforts, it can be summed up in the emperor has no clothes. They're doing everything but learning. You say it's coming, right? The dialogue education. And one of the
Not coming
main
now.
things,
It's here already. What we need to, how about when you see it, when you see dialogue, such as your wife sitting on the street with a family, celebrate it. Celebrate it. I grew up as, I mean, we have, and we still have in my beautiful Episcopal church, the magnificent celebration of the Eucharist. And the lines that the priest says, this is my body, this is my blood. I'm here with you. Now, what do you want? What kind of example do you want? Eat the bread, drink the Holy Mother McCree. But that's not dialogue. And when you do it, and this is what's so wonderful, Mary, we're going to tell you a story. Whenever you do this, and it's happening now all around the world, all around America, but when they do that, the words, the lovely, poignant words, I think, that are in the gospel, Jesus says, and when you do that, remember me. It makes me cry. Remember you. Well, yeah. It just is amazing. But what I'm saying here is that is it intractable? The only one who can undo intractable systems is Almighty God. And the Hebrew Bible, look at the intractable systems that they met. Build my pyramids. And when you build them, you got to make your own bricks, and we're not giving you the straw. Oh boy. And what did they do? I love what they did, and we might do that too at the university. They complained. I'm not learning nothing here.
Because they didn't have ears to hear.
Well, again, they did, and it went around the world. Look where you are. Look at your colleagues. And it's happening. I like the phrase, the kingdom of God is and will come. Hey, you're talking to one right here, my friend Vanessa. But the Jewish people were groaning, and God heard the groaning. That's a metaphor. You got to play with it. You got to munch on it. But look, and then undid the system of Pharaoh. Well, I'm happy to tell you that Joaquin Montero, they have these clinics now, and that's where the medical students learn, with a mentor, a doctor, and they're in the clinic with the people, speaking the language of the people, not maybe fancy Spanish. But that's the new medical school down there. They've changed the system. That's why I say it's a wonderful example. It's brilliant. When you do something and you're doing it all the time, you grab it, you name it. First of all, you do it, you name it, and then you have a celebration. And then maybe you have a story. Let everybody have their dialogue education storybook. Document it. And there's so many ways. My God, we're sitting on the tool, huh? A telephone. It's a camera, it's a computer, and there is, I want to say loudly, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity, there is no dialogue education guru. I'm learning day by day. Now there's a question. How do we share the documentation of a single moment of dialogue? That's all. A single moment, the smiles Mary's talking about. But my friend is doing seminars using dialogue education with Catholic nuns, imagine, in Tanzania. She's going all over the country. And what happens is the sisters come in and kind of stiff and what's going to happen here? What is she? Who is she? And what's going on? And she leads them they're talking to one another for a week, doing these learning tasks and examining their background, their story as a child. You know, she's a therapist. And she says what happens is they walk out laughing. Well, I don't know if laughing is allowed, but they broke that system down because they had a week of laughing together. Or it's like the women reading the name of the person. That makes me cry. And and it's not me. I'm telling stories that have happened to me.
Yeah.
Let's get the word out there. Everyone who uses this system, dialogue education, and it is a complete system now, you know what? Every time you use it, you gotta change it.
Yeah, I really appreciate the power of the dialogue, because what I'm focusing on is identifying the barriers to learning. And unfortunately, it's almost like you're saying the system of education has become a barrier to learning. And there's three areas that I found. There's not enough time, there's too much content, and
Yes.
there isn't any practice.
No, you can't. So you got it. You named them. And remember those 5 scientists. One of them was the man who wrote, I love the book, I, Thou. I think his name is Buber, Buber. I forget what he was, not French, maybe German. But Buber's book is I, Thou. And remember what Brugman found, that was 1919. They were breaking down the system by saying,
And the trauma healing that we're training in, and like there's a story-based kind to do it, and there's a classic way to do it, which has more of the information. And so we're trying to blend it because that's what we need to do. And I'm curious, does it provoke the dialogue in which the learning occurs? Is that part of what ends up happening?
That question you asked, does it? How about, try this question. How did you see this storytelling work? Or where did you see? You see what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, that helps funnel it.
It focuses it, and it evokes the power of the story. It draws out the power of the story. And you mentioned the word information in your courses that you're taking now. I like to, well, I know where the information is. It's in the people. Now, they may not know they have it, but they have a story which when you open it, guess what? You see the theory at work. Oh, the theory is called information. But the theory and the practice, it's like that lady who said, we learn nothing. Talk.
Taking to argue the other side of that, Jane, for example, like the stories that we heard recently when we did our trauma healing among the Quichua, there were worse stories than we knew in terms of what the kind of discipline and stuff that had happened. And they were like, oh, so that's not good. So they didn't know that that wasn't a good way to train people and discipline people. I mean, like tying them up and whipping them and stuff like kids. And so it's like, so they actually don't understand that that's not good, that has been trauma, and they having to learn that. So
well, let me ask all of you, what's the kind of question that you could ask given those stories? Please, offer the question to Mary. And Mary's gonna, if you don't mind, I said that.
No, I love it.
What kind of question?
What happened?
Exactly what happened to you when you were beaten? Ooh, it's tough. I mean, that is kind of, oh boy. And yet, it's like, give me the name of tell the other person the name of your firstborn. And someone might fall into tears and say, I lost that baby. And she brings up all the pain of that. That's information. It's therapeutic. I mean, this is a hard learning what that Mary is going through with, you're dealing with people in pain. Suppose you asked a question like, what experience do you want your daughter, not asking that, but your daughter to have as she's learning to read or whatever it was? I mean, they're not going to say they want her fingers slapped when she misspells a word. What will they say? And when they say that, they're certainly giving you information, but they're also giving themselves information.
Oh, that's good.
When you do this system, you teach you. And the teacher is the Holy Spirit. We know that. Who can take care of intractable situations. Walter Brueggemann has a wonderful theme in all of his works. He calls it the prophetic imagination. But describe your situation. It's almost research. Could we call it pre-search? It's research of the future. This is what it will look like when my grandchildren come to teach in Ecuador. And it's based on theory. This is theory and practice. This is delightful for me. And I thank you for listening. I'm impossible, but if you find any coherence, let me know.
Oh, yeah, we really appreciate it. And my hope is that this research will help others too. And we try to talk to different people like yourselves that bring in all these different dynamics. And the fascinating thing is the overlap, kind of like the circles of the Olympics crossing each other, coming at a similar issue from different directions. And that's affirming. So.
And the point of view which you refer to, like, or they in that language, whichever it was, talked about it being a person, not a place, but a person. The point of view.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the change, especially, I found over the years, a couple of years like this, but I found over the years that the biggest example I have, learning took place in me. You learn as you are engaged with these good people.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to change the principles and practices that are prescribed. Prescribed means written ahead of time.
Mhm.
There is nothing written ahead of time when you walk into a situation that you're in with the people who live in that beautiful scenery there behind you.
Yeah.
There's
And that's
no-
part of the structure we have with the curriculum that's written ahead of time to people they don't know who they're writing to.
No, and also the only thing that I like to think for myself anyway, try it. The only thing that's prescribed is the life of Jesus and the Hebrew Bible that prepared us for it. Ooh. But don't worry, I'll change some of that too. I'm fresh enough. Hey, that has to apply to women.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. We really, really appreciate this time and
Been a
what an
joy.
opportunity to hear.
I'm glad that it worked. Thank you all.
All
Thank
right.
you. Thank you for sitting in your rocking chair and bringing to life years before, because
Yeah.
we don't consider those 24 years nothing.
Oh, no, it's true.
It's cooking your wisdom, isn't it? Like
I was cooking it up. That's right.
Yeah.
cooking your wisdom, like kind of like a slow cooker, figuring it out, processing.
But that's a great image. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tom.
Bye
Good to
now.
go.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And thanks to Henny Madden. I like that. It's got a lovely,
Kind of ready to.
lovely music to it. Thanks a million.
All right.
Bye, Jane.
Bye,
Take
dear.
care.